It's the Misfits.
So, rounding out on almost exactly 4 years ago now, after hearing the gospel words probably thousands of times, I approached church in a pretty desperate way, and for the first time in my life, I actually met Jesus. I was confronted with the truth at a time where truth and hope were the two things that I so very desperately needed. And I was disarmed by the person delivering it in a way that I could only call supernatural. And it was at that moment where my world shattered in the best possible way, and I realized this thing that I had been hearing so much about, this thing that I had teached about, and I had, I knew the songs and I knew the routines and all of it, but it was actually true, and that changed my life from there on out.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Mystery Misfits. We are in Season 2. This is Episode 2.
That's right. And Day of the Twos.
That's right, and this is probably going to be the last, and it's a Tuesday, so that makes it good too.
There we go.
So the problem is, though, that this is probably going to be the last episode where I actually have the right episode number for the season.
So after 2 is where it goes downhill?
That's where it went downhill last season, so we'll see how that goes. So, as you can tell, we are still in our studio, which we hope to remain here.
Yeah, but we're going to hopefully have a new background.
Yeah,
along with the new website and everything else.
That's
up,
right.
And a new haircut.
Yeah, we're going to ignore that. There were some issues in translation with the barber. We're hoping that by next episode, maybe next episode, we're hoping for next episode that we're going to be kind of in a new setting, maybe even a little bit of a different format, although it's not going to be completely different.
No, it'll be pretty much the same, just hopefully some different designs and
different backgrounds. So we are going to hopefully be moving over to a different recording platform that will allow us to have, well, it's going to allow me to have more fun. I don't know about you.
Being on Buzzsprout, I'm already enjoying.
Well, that's not even the one I'm talking about.
I know, but that's also been a change that I am enjoying to get the emails on. And going into.
We're finding Buzzsprout to be way more interactive and fun, and give us much better idea of what you guys actually want than what we had last season. So we are in Season 2. This is Episode 2, and today we have a very special guest. Some of you may actually recognize him. He and I hang out Saturday nights on live stream doing Kingdom on the Road. He also has like 5 other shows that he does throughout the week because, why not? Buddy Walk with Jesus, Kingdom on the Road, Systemic Geekology, which is hilarious. If you have anybody that has not checked that out, you need to, because it's hilarious, the stuff they're doing there. Joseph Day, welcome to Ministry Misfits.
Thanks for having me, guys.
So you are here today, though, not to talk about the mountain of work that you're doing, which we'll have links for all that. I may have to create a separate page for you to get all of your links.
A whole new bio, which is shout out to the new website that you created.
That's right, ministrymisfits.com. If we haven't actually, I don't think we've actually said it on air yet.
No, because we did not have the licensing.
Yes, we hadn't got it official yet when we recorded last time. But if you go to ministrymisfits.com, that is the new website, and that's where you'll be able to find all this stuff. If you go to the resource link and then go to guests, you'll be able to find all of our guests from Season 1, as well as our first guest of Season 2, Joe here, and you'll be able to find the links to, if not all the stuff, at least the stuff that I like that he does. So you'll be able to check out his stuff. But today we are talking about your story, as well as a not exclusively American trap, but an American originating trap theologically speaking, which is the prosperity gospel, which we've talked about a little bit on here.
I've also hinted at it and probably talked just briefly, but haven't gotten to a full dive. Kind of like when we talked about Cold War theology, but never discussed what it is.
Right. I think the first time we mentioned it, well, not first time we mentioned it, the first time we actually kind of poked at it was the nonprofits and nonprofits episode.
Mm-hmm.
But today we're actually going to dive into, I would say, the large dumpster that is prosperity gospel and actually see what the trash that's in it actually is. So, Joe, let's start talking about you specifically, because, you know, most people that would be familiar with you from our show, or at least from the stuff that we're doing online, know you as, you know, you are the epitome of a Christian podcast guy. You live stream all the time. You even do some of your personal devotions online, so that way other people can, you know, put input in as well as, you know, listen in and, you know, be able to walk through the Bible with you. You know, you've made a lot of different connections, probably not more so than everybody, but one of the most active within the Christian Podcast Association as far as networking. But that's not necessarily how you started. Give us a picture of who Joe at least was, if not still is.
So I spent a large portion of my life as the fox in the hen house, so to speak. I was an atheist among Christians because Christians were the ones that weren't allowed to kick me out. And so it was, you know, I got very good at blending in. All of that preponderance of backstory aside, I walked away, and then through a series of circumstances, almost exactly 4 years ago, got saved, actually met Jesus for the first time. So I'm in this unique situation where I've heard a lot of the lingo, I've heard a lot of the stuff of it all, but I don't really have a firm foundation. And that's key to, as we get down this road, not having anything that when I hear other people and other people's conjecture and other people's teaching, I don't have that firm foundation yet to compare it to. So I'm going through this process, and I came to Christ as a serial entrepreneur. I've spent a lot of my adult life starting businesses and working in startups and doing different things like that. It's a holistic culture that I really thoroughly enjoy. And so as I'm exploring out this whole thing, I come across, you know, it's kind of funny. I came across this guy as just looking for like motivational stuff on YouTube to listen to while working out, because I'm also an athlete. And so listening to stuff, and I heard this guy start to teach and start to say, you know, oh, you can have all of this stuff. You can have the stuff and things of it all. God doesn't want you to be sick. God wants you to be rich and prosperous and all of that kind of stuff. And it's all God flavored, right? So it's all that same stuff that I'm after as an entrepreneur. But now somebody is presenting it in a way that says, wait, all of this stuff is God ordained. Man, I was hooked like a mark. I was in like none other. Like this was, I'd finally found the truth in my mind, and I ran with it. Now, the other thing to establish with all of this is through all of it, right? All of the backstory, all of the series of events that led to this, my identity, what I had established for myself was crumbled to the ground by illness, issues, life.
Now, and so real quick, something important with that. Your business side. This isn't just you were just, you know, some kind of serial investor that just, you know, like a John Ralphio, you know, Tom Haverford type from Parks and Rec. You actually were a successful investor, businessman, startup, correct? This wasn't just a, like, you know, all terms and purposes, even though you may not use this terminology anymore, you were actually a business expert in terms of how to do this kind of stuff, correct?
Yeah. At this point, I had successfully started and offloaded a coffee shop and a marketing agency. I had done work in a couple of different places with product design, things like that.
Yeah, so this is not just for those trying to follow his story. This isn't your typical, like, oh, I was in business, but I wasn't that good at it. I was, just some average, you're not Jim Halpert of just an average salesperson. This is a Dwight Schrute approach. And I promise I'm not going to just keep throwing NBC shows in until they sponsor us. This is not a, you are a... you talked about being a fox in the hen house type of thing in terms of your relationship with the church. But really, you were the fox in the hen house even in the business world. So you're talking about the fact that you are successful. This guy comes in, says, you can have all of this and God. But you also are talking about identity-wise, there's some things missing. So go back into your story a little bit. What was it all that started going on here?
So I used to ask the question, and it's going to sound like I'm going off on a rabbit trail, but it ties in. I used to ask the question.
Rabbit trails if they've listened to us. So
you're all good.
So you hear these stories of people that are young, that are successful, that end up blowing all of the money and then end up in a worse spot than when they found success. And a lot of times in these kinds of stories, you hear about that person taking their own life. And I used to ask the question as I was, getting settled into the business world, man, if you have all of this success and stuff, then how is it that you could be that messed up that it's all kind of hollow? Like, man, money solves a lot of problems, guys. Like that can go a long way in trying to find you happiness, that sort of idea. If I'm looking at it in the thick of things, I would have never said this, but looking back on it, I had started down that road of self-destruction because when there's only so far that money and success can take you. And for me, the wheels had started falling off on who am I as a person, right? I'm a successful entrepreneur. I'm a successful this. I can do this. These are all attributes to what I'm good at. Who am I as a person? And that's kind of the basis of where all of that started to unfold. Now, on top of that, I made a quick note of coming to the cross very sick. I had a severe infection that almost killed me. They thought it was cancer. And in the midst of all of this, the sales and marketing side of what I was doing, the agency side, all of that crumbled because I was trying to find another way to fulfill everything that I needed to fulfill, with obviously not being able to be the mouthpiece and the person actively doing fulfillment. And that led me to make some bad business decisions, some quick sort of turnarounds that were more about get rich quick than they were about actually thinking about it strategically and things like that. And so both personally and professionally, I had like I said, the wheels were starting to fall off. And so I came to this church service with this whole thing of, okay, maybe the pastor will say something that'll make me feel good for 5 minutes. And I just need a little bit of a break from the world. And that, like I said, that supernatural experience took place at that point.
Were you a Christian at that point, or were you still searching?
I was still searching. If you had asked me at that point in time, I was an atheist. I didn't want anything. I was actively trying to push myself away from God because of all of the preponderance of backstory before. And so that's why I didn't necessarily put a lot of stock into this whole idea of going to church outside of maybe hearing something that might make me feel good for a minute. You know what I mean? And that's hearing that was the time that I had heard the gospel really for the first time. And that also led me to this question of, okay, so I came to this thing very sick. I am now getting treatments and things like that. And now I've got this relationship. What now? What does this mean now? You know what I mean? There's this weird psychological thing that happens when somebody presents you with your own mortality. Mm-hmm. There is this shift that has to take place if you survive that moment, because now you have to look forward to the rest of your life, and what do you do with that? You know what I mean? And so all of that was this perfect storm of coming to this point of hearing the prosperity gospel for the first time with nothing invested into who I am or what my identity is or anything like that. And so I was literally the perfect mark for this whole way of thinking.
And that's what, we can start there before we take a quick break here, is what you're describing there. There's a lot of things we could really, we probably have enough to do a whole series right here. We've got things like identity crisis. We've got, just going from the top to the bottom, just a general morale type thing. We've got the psychology, mortality psychology, all of these different things. But what you are describing as far as being the perfect mark for the prosperity gospel, let's start with that. Do you think that what do you think was the biggest factor in that? Do you think it was the business? Do you think it was the sudden mortality sentiment, or the fact that you were actively searching for something? I mean, I know it's obviously a combination of the three. But out of those three, what do you think actually played the biggest role?
I think you have to be at a specific point in your life. Now, that flavor might look a little bit different for every person, but that point in life has to have some characteristics to it in order for you to be the right sort of audience. Because if you don't care about success and money and all of that, then you're not going to necessarily care about the prosperity gospel. If you don't care necessarily about hearing somebody say that God doesn't want you sick, then you're not going to necessarily care about the prosperity gospel. And so there are other fuels that you can add to that fire, but I think the kindling has to be being at that point in life where those are things that you care about hearing spoken about.
And I think it sounds familiar too, from coming from the business world. You're like, okay, I know money, and I kind of know God a little bit, but for the most part, I know money, and I tried it on my own, so it didn't work out. So if I hear that, all I have to do is follow Jesus, and he's going to give me the wealth and riches, well, let me try that get rich quick scam to see what happens. And so it's almost like another opportunity of something you're familiar with to see, you know what, I tried it on my own, didn't work. Let's see what this guy has to say.
I want to double down on the word that you just used because it's very apropos. Scam. I use the word mark a lot, and one of the things that when I speak about this, I have to be honest about is, in order to tell the cautionary tale, you have to admit that at one point in time you were the mark. Mm-hmm. And for those of you that don't know, a mark is somebody who is a target audience for a scam, a scheme, a con, something along those lines. And that might seem like a heavy blow against that sort of approach of the prosperity gospel, because if you're using the word mark or you're using the word scam, that has a lot of implications to this style of teaching. But I mean every single implication that comes along with using that sort of word, that sort of language, because when you extrapolate this out, when you take this and you run with it and you understand the full implication of what you're saying, when you say things like, okay, now if I just worship God, God's favor is on me, so I'm going to make $1 million. Or God's favor is on me, so that way the test will come back negative. That means that God is not performing in certain parts of the world. That means that God is making mistakes in a lot of parts of the world because these things are happening on a regular basis.
And that's what, going back even to, the area that we cover a lot and that apparently we named. This again is the Cold War theology setting. We said, for me, this is not an American problem, because we see it everywhere in the world. The prosperity gospel, the name and claim it, health, wealth, all of that. But primarily it started as an American theological con. We'll just call it what it is. I was going to use a much stronger word, but you made a much nicer word earlier.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah. A theological con. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that, again, we are looking at the fact that we are saying God really only is focused here.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't matter what everything else in the world is going on. We've got to get it right here first. And so we're gonna take a quick break. And then when we come back, we're going to hear, first of all, how he got out of this, what the process was getting out. And then we'll spend the rest of the time actually breaking down what the con actually is. This is a little bit different than some of the other, heresies and things that we've discussed on here, because this really is, like he said, this is a con game. And so there are actual steps that we can walk through and, in my opinion, completely obliterate. So we are going to take a quick break, and then we'll be right back.
We'll be right back.
Season 2 of the Ministry Misfits podcast and our awesome theme song are brought to you by Laird Creative Agency.
In our social media world, the next connection is always one click or scroll away, and your business has to be ready when they find you.
That's why Laird Creative is always looking for ways to step your brand up. Whether you're looking to overhaul your brand one time with a new website, or want to save money by outsourcing your graphic and media content, Laird Creative Agency is here to help. Laird Creative's mission is to take the difficulty out of the creative process. With Laird Creative, you'll find a dedicated team of artists ready to tackle any creative need that your business has, big or small.
If you're looking for an easier way to share the vision of your organization through thoughtful branding and creative content, find them at lairdcreativeagency.com to get started. Mention the Ministry Misfits podcast and get a free consultation call. Laird Creative, step your brand up.
Today's a great day to start your own podcast. Whether you're looking for a new marketing channel, have a message you want to share with the world, or just think it would be fun to have your own talk show, podcasting is an easy, inexpensive, and fun way to expand your online reach.
Buzzsprout is hands down the easiest and best way to launch, promote, and track your podcast. Your show can be online listened on all major platforms within minutes of finishing your first recording. We just switched to Buzzsprout for Season 2 and have immediately noticed the difference.
With Buzzsprout, you get a great-looking podcast website, audio players that you can drop into your websites, detailed analytics to see how people are listening, tools to promote your episodes, and more. Podcasting isn't hard when you have the right partners, and Buzzsprout and the Misfits want to help you get started.
Contact us for a free consultation call, and then visit our affiliate link to get started with Buzzsprout. Using this link not only helps support the Misfits, but it also gets you a $20 Amazon gift card. The teams at Buzzsprout and Ministry Misfits are passionate about helping you succeed. Join over 100,000 podcasters already using Buzzsprout to get their message out to the world. To find out more, go to www.ministrymisfits.com/affiliates.
We're back.
All right, everybody, welcome back. We are still in episode 2, and I still know that it's episode 2, so we're in good shape.
Yeah, we're in good track. After 5, we'll see what happens with that.
But yeah.
So today we are with Joseph Day, and we are going through a little bit more of his story of coming to Christ, kind of that, I'll say the hook that maybe enticed him a little bit, which we've talked about through the prosperity gospel, and then we're going to talk about
what it is.
What it is, and kind of deconstruct it a little bit more. So
start us off, when we ended, we were talking about the fact that, you were the perfect mark. We talked about the fact that we're using that word intentionally. This is not this is a fun phrase to say. This is a legitimate, this is what it was. Which, to start with, I do want to point out as well that this is something that, for those, as we get through his story, you'll see, but for those that have come out of it, or that are wanting to come out of it, or are trying to help somebody else out of it, the vulnerability of being able to say, I was conned, is a very good place to start. So let's actually start there a little bit. You've been hooked. You are fully involved. How is it that you start to recognize, I've been scammed here?
So God brought me back to a guy that was mentoring me previously, before I had moved out of the area and all of that. I was starting to attend the church again that he was pastoring, and he and I sat down and spoke, and I was explaining to him like some of the projects that I'm working on and some of these teachings and all of those kinds of things. And I remember he's just sitting there kind of taking in everything that I'm saying and regurgitating the bad teachings and all of that kind of stuff. And he goes, so let me ask you something. If all of this is true, then why did most of the people that walked with Jesus die broke, alone, dying for their faith in a prison cell? I couldn't answer the question. And that messed me up, because I had bought this whole thing, and in 5 seconds, somebody asked a question that started to pull the strings on this whole thing. And that started me down this road of, I guess, starting to look at the world around me, because in that when you're hooked on this thing, it's all about emotion. That's what makes it so dangerous. It's all about the emotion of it all, moral comfort of it all. And so you almost have these blinders on, and then you take the blinders off and you look at the world around you and you say, man, if this is true, then I can't reconcile the truth of the prosperity gospel with the world around me.
Right.
And that started the deconstruction process of this whole thing.
Did it feel like that same unraveling from the first time of you personally, from the high wealth level to more or less rock bottom, which it not necessarily was, or was it more
spiritually? That would be what you're asking. True. Here is that spiritually, do we have the equivalence of going from top of the business world to the bottom and being sick, to top of the spiritual high, down to a ultimate spiritual low?
Yeah, or was it more freeing than anything, knowing that you didn't have to work and strive for this non-reachable wealth level?
Now, it's more the latter. Originally, it was definitely the closer to the former, because I'd gone through all of this stuff, right? And I thought I had it figured out. Now that this whole identity is, again, stripped away. So I'm left again with, okay, so then what is all of this about? What is this life about? I refuse to believe honestly, I refuse to follow a God that says it's all about slogging through this life, this 70, 80 years to get to the good stuff afterwards. But what does that actually look like? And so I was left in a place where, again, I had no basis of foundation. And thankfully, God put me in a position where I was surrounded by people that could speak into that, where I was around, while I myself didn't have a firm foundation, I was around people who could speak those kinds of things into my life and put me in the right direction to try and start to sort out what it looks like to be a fully functioning citizen of the kingdom of God.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is maybe a easier question than answer. Do you think you would have still found Christ had it not been for that prosperity gospel? Because that's what was kind of enticing. Do you think you would have, knowing the truth, would have that been enticing enough, or do you think that's really what you needed at that time to fully be brought in?
So I still think I would have found it because it was 1A and 1B. 1A was that come to Jesus moment that was that kind of supernatural experience and all of those kinds of things. And then right closely thereafter, as I was like starting to form and look and things like that, was when I found the prosperity gospel. And so, yeah, I do. I would be curious to see how it would have worked for me to find this path, as far as like speaking about things like kingdom, speaking about things like relationship and all of those kinds of things that I fundamentally hold on to now, without kind of that rocky first part of the journey.
Yeah. I would say, this is where, we'll close out not close out your story. We're not closing you out. Close out the personal side of what we're talking about here. And it really actually leads us into talking about what it is that prosperity what the con actually is. The first part of what you talked about within your story is this identity crisis and not having a foundation. And then you were just talking again. You had this come to Christ moment, but then didn't know what to do with it, and because there was no foundation, the first thing that came along was the prosperity gospel, and it fit your lifestyle and everything else. This first thing we got to look at is this foundational side of things. And this is why, we're going to start off season 2 right off the bat with the 3 tiers right away. This is why we talk about that Christocentric theology being the foundation of everything else. Is that if you start with Christ at the center and then have a biblical theology of what that looks like, you can move from 1A to 1B without having all these external things coming in.
Right.
But in order to do that, you've got to, like you said, you've got to be surrounded and have guidance to do that. And so I think the first thing we actually need to talk about with this is the way our churches actually approach the evangelism of businessmen.
Yeah.
Because, typically, unfortunately, I know all too well the way that the church approaches the wealthy people in their communities. They want them in their churches, but not for, and again, when we make these generalizations, we're not saying every church does this. We're saying that the church culture, this is the way the church culture acts. They want these wealthy businessmen in because they're wealthy, not because they want to see actual discipleship happen.
Right. Yeah, that there are some stereotypes that are stereotypes for a reason, because they're born out of at least some layer and level of truth. Mm-hmm. Now, obviously, you can go too far with saying every single church and every single denomination and all of this kind of stuff, but there's absolutely a reality to what you just said, because those wealthy people are viewed in a way as though they are longevity. They're not viewed as people. They're viewed as a paycheck for their pastor. They're viewed as long-standing money coming into the church.
So Now, with that being said, you were the, again, we'll call that, in reality, we're going to call that way to Sue. You were the mark for that as well.
Yeah.
What is it, though, that you, who was dealing with an identity crisis, who did not have a foundation to stand on and was looking for somebody to come alongside you, what is it that you, as that individual, actually needed to see come out of a church? What was the evangelism, the discipleship process that you actually needed to see come to you from the church that was down the street?
I needed hope. Because at that point in my life, I had nothing to hope for. I could not put my hope in any particular thing, and I so desperately needed to know that there was something that I could hope for that was outside of me and outside of my circumstances and things like that. And coming to this, I was already geared towards putting my hope in being able to have enough zeros at the end of the bank account, because we know that in this world, having enough money is in fact a superpower. That, to me, that was hope. And so if this thing is still saying, hey, you had the right idea, but you just need to get there a different way, it preys upon the people that don't know better. And that's why we also see this happening in other parts of the world. Through my ministry efforts, I have a chance to talk to a lot of people from across the world. And there are versions of this. A lot of times in other countries, it looks more like healing and like weird prophet stuff than it does necessarily money per se. But it's still this same kind of idea of people who don't know better, that are looking for hope, that are looking for something of substance that's outside of themselves. And so these teachers come through. Generally speaking, it's somebody with a platform or somebody that's trying to build out a platform that is saying, hey, I hold the key to your hope. I hold the key for everything that you're looking for. Follow me, and I will teach you how to unlock this part of yourself that can have everything that you ever wanted and also have God.
Yeah, and I think it's those words that just sound so sweet to our ears of, oh, I can have a relationship with Jesus and be rich. Like, sure, sign me up. Like, that's great. But so I appreciated, I know it was the pastor or mentor at the time that broke it down of, all right, let's look at Jesus' disciples while he was here on earth. What happened with them? So, yeah, let's take a little bit more biblical dive into...
Well, before we even get there, we need to actually break down for those that are like, okay, I hear everybody talking about the dangers of the prosperity gospel, or this person's a prosperity preacher, or all this stuff. We need to actually define what it is we're talking about. Because, I don't remember what we were calling him over on Kingdom on the Road, but a friend of Joe and I's, who he shows up in all of the podcast platforms. He has his own show, Reconstructed Faith, which you should go listen to, those wanting to know what Reconstruction actually is. Matt Winter, he and I had this discussion last night of the prosperity gospel is a cover-all term for a lot of different theological cons.
Right.
There is some of these, like, what you were talking about was much more of a, if you come to Jesus, God is going to bless you with wealth. There are, the one that is exported across the world most of the time is, if you pay in the money to the church, God is going to bless you with good health, and you're not going to have to worry about the AIDS epidemic that's ravaging your community.
Right.
You've got that one. You've got guys, you've got others where it's, God has given me a word, and but he also said that it's not free, so you've got to pay me to get it, is another one that's out there. There are a lot of different ones, but the main things that wrap up in it is, really, we can wrap this con up in idolatry. We are violating commandment 1 with either wealth, health, and there are even some where it's eternal life. eternal life, which is something that we would all agree is actually part of the gospel and is part of what is promised to us if we put our faith in Jesus, can be turned into an idolatrous con. So what we are talking about really is these different theological cons that are replacing something with God as far as what your goal and identity should be. And the way to get to it is through either financing the ministry or through putting your faith in quote unquote Jesus. Because the reality is we know that that's not actually who they're directing you to with your faith.
I would even add on there just personal self.
Right. And that's the other one.
Yeah, that kind of pull yourself up by your bootstraps and let's get this, because I've got God on my side, so as long as I just keep trucking forward, get out of my way. I can do all things through a verse taken out of context. Yes.
Yes.
And this is where we really need, and again, this is why we are starting at level 1 foundations here with our theology, and it's Christocentric. Is that when we have this foundation, we're going to be able to actually identify what these different, heresies, but in a more realistic, easy to understand term, what these cons actually are and why they are so enticing. So now that we have that set, back to what we're talking about here as far as how do we know that these things are cons? How do we know these things are heresies? What Brandon was getting to was what you had talked about in your story as far as somebody pointed out the track record of those that follow Jesus as far as how their lives turn out. Was there any, even going back to the Prosperity Gospel Church that you were a part of, or the guy that brought you into it, or any of these self-help manuals, was there any way to be able to combat that doubt?
So, probably the most dangerous portion of all of this doesn't matter if it's, because you can start to branch out on the tree to things like name it and claim it, personal revelations, moral comfort, moral relativism, all of this kind of stuff. All of these different offshoots are all born from the same tree. Mm-hmm. And so when you look at this, you have to be honest about who's the main character of this. What is this putting as the focal point? The self or God? And we know, and this thing kind of sticks in the back of your mind of there's only two kingdoms, the kingdom of darkness and the kingdom of his dear son. That's it. And there's this weird overlap in between area of what does it mean to have the self? What does it mean to really die to the self or to worship the self and all of those kinds of things? And when that is what is being pumped into, when that is where your prime focus is, and you have nothing to counterbalance that, then you're just asking a person to go down the road that is most comfortable for them. That's why the Bible talks about dying to yourself on a regular basis, because we're geared towards worshiping the self, looking out for ourselves, all of those kinds of things. And so whenever you have somebody that is pointing you in the direction of this idea of a personal revelation of some kind, right? God wants you to start this business. God wants you to, be successful or have health or whatever the case may be. That's the most telling sign. When it's so geared towards you.
Right. And that's what I wanted to clarify here, because we're not bashing Pentecostalism here. We're not bashing even, the spiritual movement of, God giving people insight, things like that. But what we are talking about is the danger of doing these sort of things without a theological understanding and an understanding of the fact that what we're talking about is everything is centered back in on who Christ is. Mm-hmm. God, we talk about all the time with the holy discontent. God gives us instruction on what he has created us to do. But all of it falls back on, this is going to be edifying to the body, this is going to be edifying to Christ, and this is going to be something that is not going to be detrimental to our faith. And when we talk about detrimental to our faith, we're not talking about doubt. We're not talking about all this stuff. We're talking about the fact that this is not something that, if we are actually doing what God is telling us to do, is going to pull us straight into idolatry or into a false con gospel. There are plenty of people in ministry that are pulled into idolatry, but that's because they've lost sight of their ministry. Right. And have gotten instead attached to this stuff that we're talking about here. It makes me feel better. It provides for my family. It does this, and this. When in reality, the goal is not about us at all. It's all about Christ and Christ's kingdom first.
And that's what.
And I think born out of that is this moving goalpost of things like faith in God's presence. Mm-hmm. I'm going to say something that might be a little bit scandalous.
Uh-oh.
I think that we have made an idol out of being in God's presence or experiencing God's presence or something, some version thereof. I would even say that we've gone as far as to make an idol out of faith. Yep. Have faith to move mountains. Okay, hang on. That faith the size of a mustard seed, that is biblical. We cannot negotiate our way out of that, just like we cannot negotiate our way out of Jesus saying, asking you shall receive. These are biblical truths. However, if you notice, Jesus doesn't go into a million caveats because there's this assumption of right understanding, because these people have been walking with him, learning from him. These are people that know the scriptures, and these are people that have a well-rounded idea of the character of God. So when they hear something like, ask in my name, ask and you shall receive, you can move mountains, you will do greater things than these, all of these different things that are taken and prostituted 3 ways from Sunday in the American church model, and subsequently, catch this, teaching people to go out to other parts of the world who they're so unarmed to be able to spiritually defend themselves that these people are building entire theological systems around this, and they're screwed through this from Sunday because there's no counterbalance. And so you're seeing lives destroyed based off of this idea of, okay, so we take these little things and we build entire centers around these individual points without taking the entirety of the character of God. And that's why I point back to anytime anybody asks me, okay, so we can sit here and go 3 hours just talking about the many, many offshoots of the prosperity gospel and some of the other things that you may have heard about, things like Name It and Claim It, things like that. What was that garbage book that came out, The Secret? Came out that
you won't find the link on our website.
Yeah, that is not in our resource department. Well, so one thing you said there that I think we need to we can really start the process of closing out the conversation with. Again, there's nothing, the scripture says there's nothing new under the sun. And the phrase that you use there, I think, is the key to all of this. You said that we are prostituting God out.
Yep.
That is literally what we are talking about with this con. This is this was a big thing all throughout the Old Testament into the New Testament with every single culture and every single religion that was out there, is this idea of there were temple prostitutes. Judaism does not allow for temple prostitutes. But yet, constantly throughout the Old Testament, what is it that God uses as what he's saying you have done is you have prostituted yourself to other gods. And now we go into the New Testament and we are seeing the exact same thing here in 2022 of we have prostituted ourselves to other gods. Our churches are now temples for something else. Whether it's money, whether it's fame, whether it's sex, whether it's food. There are some temples to food. Mm-hmm. Shout out to all of us that, potlucks are a requirement for your salvation. You've got people, whether it's health, whether in some cases it still is sex, which is part of the irony of some of the pastors right now that are so focused in on purity and modesty that they are completely ignoring the cries of women for just fair treatment beyond just being sexualized, just even the way that we talk to them. All of these sort of things. And yet, if, these are idols, they're idolatrous, and we cling to them because it feeds something deeper inside of us, but it's not the desire for God, it's the desire for sin.
Yeah, and that's where my head went to with Matthew 6:24, of like, no one can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and money. And like you said, replace money with anything else, blank, that's not God. And I think we all fall into times in our life where we have our own masters, whether it's ourselves or something else that we cling on to. But yeah, we ultimately need to choose and serve God. I like what you said, Joe, of who's really the true person at the center of the story here. Is it us? Is it the money? Is it the fame? Or is it God?
Well, and this again is where, we talk about this before. I think we even talked about it one night when I was on, Kingdom on the Road, is, we have to ask the question, and people look at this question as they look at this as a theological con game when I ask the question. But most of the time it's because they don't actually want to answer it honestly. If heaven was out of the picture, if it didn't matter if you becoming a follower of Christ and devoting your life to Jesus as Lord meant no eternal life, no heaven, potentially even that it meant serving time in hell, would you still become a Christian?
Right.
Because what that does, even though we're not saying we believe any of that, and we can point in Scripture where that is not the case, what it does point to, though, is what is your motivation for doing all of this? Are you doing this to get to heaven, or are you falling at the feet of the creator of the world who died for you and serving him because he deserves it because of who he is, not because of what he's going to give us? Mm-hmm. Because at times, like you said, we can make an idol and we can make a con game out of the one gift that God gives us freely, which is salvation through his Son. Even that can be used to entice people in for things that are not of God and are not building up of the kingdom.
Because I think that speaks to the fact that every person, whether they realize it or not, has a desire towards something outside of themselves. And that can manifest in so many different ways. But I really fundamentally believe that every human being has this desire for something outside of themselves to display hope or to display like guidance or something along those lines. And ultimately, I think part of that, wrapped up in all of that, is every person's desire to have an identity. And when that identity is off or missing, then that's when you start to see a lot of, like, humans start to do some weird stuff to try and fill that void that's missing. Some people find it at the end of a bottle, some people find it at the end of a bag, some people find it on the street corner, whatever. That's Baskin Robbins. You can find your flavor of however you want to fill that void.
Some people do fill that void with Baskin Robbins. So
right, exactly. But I think what I have honestly found is that that's when you are seeking after what that identity is, what your identity is in this world, why you matter, or anything like that, that asking those questions, that's not inherently bad. Asking what you believe and why you believe it, those things aren't inherently bad. And shout out to Brother Matthew. Go check out his show, because he will show you what it means to reconstruct. But you, as you go through this process, it's this weird parallel road where you're not doing the bad thing by asking those questions. It's how you're answering those questions that really makes the difference. And if there's any one thing that I want to say to anybody who may be hearing this, that has gone through this or has experienced this or doesn't know what to do with this or whatever the case may be, there's a part of this as you're exiting this that you have to admit, you got had. It happens. But on the other side of that, admitting the fact that something happened is something that's so much richer than the prosperity gospel could ever give you. Something that's so much more 3 and 4 dimensional than the prosperity gospel could ever give you. Because the money runs out, the success runs out, and unfortunately, there are some things that you hit in this life you can't hit hard enough. You can't throw enough money at. You can't negotiate your way out of. These are just the bare essentials of this life, and that is the moment where the hope runs out that the prosperity gospel gives you. It could take you a really far way down the field, but eventually that runs out and you're left again with nothing. So try to set aside that prideful portion of it and just understand that there's something richer on the other side of it.
That's good. So we are out of time for today. Joe probably will be back at some point. I'm sure he'll show up again. We'll have him back on. We'll talk some of these. We can talk more in depth on this or some of the other thousands of projects you're doing that we can talk through. If you want to check out all of his stuff, again, go to ministrymisfits.com, go to the guest page in our resources, and you'll see the mountain list of all the different projects he's doing. Probably if you were to go to his stuff today, you'd probably be able to catch him live even within probably the next couple of hours of you listening to this. Those that want to check him and I out together, check us out, Kingdom on the Road, on Saturday nights around 7:30 Eastern. We do some live stream Bible study type stuff with some other podcast friends of ours. We might as well shout him out too. Yeah. Go check out Brother Matthew at Reconstructed Faith. He may show his face up on here a couple of times. He and I are also potentially working on another project as well at the moment that we may have some more information for you on. But if you want to see, we talked today. Joe laid out, these are the questions we need to ask. Matthew's going to be able to say, this is how we answer the questions. So there's a good balance there together. In the meantime, those of you that want to keep on checking us out, you can do that in a couple of ways.
That's right. So the easiest way, now that it's all set up, is just www.ministrymisfits.com. Check out our new website that Andrew did a great job of creating, where you can find different ways to give. One is through Patreon.
That's right. We do have Patreon up and running. We've got a couple of levels up right now. I'm working on really, we're looking at the practicability of level 4 because we want to do it, but we're not sure what that would look like. So keep checking back. If you don't want to give $20, you want to give more, just keep checking back. Eventually, we'll give you the option.
Maybe we'll do a meet and greet or something.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
But we're so hard to get a hold of.
That's right. Speaking of getting a hold of us.
That's right.
That's right. through the website. If you go to the contact us, you can contact us there. If you want to be a guest like Joe, you can fill out a form there. You can also just send us some questions. There's also a review panel on there, or you can get a hold of us on social media because we literally are everywhere.
That's right. And there is a new Facebook discussion group
That's
too,
right.
that is created. So shout out to, I think we've got over 50 people already joined in that group. So thank you to who've already joined. And the name of that one is
Misfits Community, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, I can't remember.
So that's kind of a, I want to say safe place, but that'll probably
as safe as social media allows us to
right.
be. It's a safe place.
But hopefully a good place where we can continue the discussion online, and we'll post different questions on there and continue conversations and hopefully have healthy conversations like the one we just had here with Joe.
And I believe Joe is actually in there already. So if you even want to continue this discussion with him, you can do that there as well. Is that everything?
Do we want to talk about the shop?
Oh yeah, the shop. That's what it was.
Last thing.
Our store is back up online. I think some of our items got deleted in the turnover. We did add a nice new mug with our faces on it. But and all that. But
did they call that an ugly mug? Padooch. All right, we'll work on that.
Okay. Yeah, our mugs are on the mug.
Yeah.
In addition to that, though, the Tikva Tea is still up. Shout out to Tikva, our partners there. We're working on a couple of other projects with them as we speak. But the Tikva Teas are there. Every purchase of that, 70% of the profit goes back to the work that they're doing with our kids here in inner city Canton. So this has been episode 2 of season 2. Joe, thanks for coming on. I will actually see you later tonight. Those of you that want to check out his stuff, again, go to the website. You can find it all there. You can also find him within the Misfits community group, and we will see all of you next time.
The Ministry Misfits podcast is a production of Ministry Misfit Media in association with Overwhelming Victory. Dr. Greg Linville and Andrew Fouts are our executive producers, and Brandon Simmons is associate producer. The Ministry Misfits theme song is written and produced by J.D. Laird and Laird Creative Agency. If you would like to get in touch with us, you can email us at ministrymisfitmedia@gmail.com or by following @ministrymisfit on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. You can also visit our website at www.ministrymisfits.com or through bio.link/ministrymisfits. If you would like to support Ministry Misfits, you can become a patron by going to patreon.com/ministrymisfits.